Welcome everyone to another episode of Low Brass U Studio Class. I believe this is episode 5, if my recollection is correct, and if the title is correct. But we've got a good show for you today. We've got some topics planned. One that I was thinking about is talking about recording brass instruments, how we deal with that. You know, that's something that all of us are kind of having to do a little bit more often now. So, but before we get into that, we need to introduce Mr. Connor Eisenmenger.
Hello, everyone. Once again, I'm glad to be here. So excited to get started.
And it's kind of back to a normal stream. I know last week was a little bit weird. You know, we don't have that weird white border anymore that you wouldn't let me get rid of.
I liked it.
I don't know. I'm looking up too high. I just put up Connor knows this, but I literally today just put up a TV above everything, so I can see things clearly, but I can also look closer to the camera, and I just kind of look silly when I look up. But it was a very good Facebook Marketplace find. There's a 43-inch TV for $50. So I feel like with a mount already. So I feel like it was a good decision. But awesome. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into the first topic here. Make sure that these comments are working, and they look like they are. So hello to Theater Feller. We wanted to talk a little bit about recording a brass instrument, how we do that, what we're thinking about, and by no means is this going to be the end-all, be-all of how to record a brass instrument, because that could probably be a whole, more than an hour of discussion, and you still wouldn't get to the bottom of it. So I guess, we could talk a little bit about just kind of some guidelines from the beginning. So one of the things that, especially when I was doing a lot of Instagram videos, like, a few years ago, a lot of people would always ask me what mic I use, and it's like my cell phone mic, the built-in one. But if you follow a few kind of practices with that, I think you can get really good results. So I think that might be a good place to start. So are there some things that you think about when you're recording yourself with like cell phone or something kind of simple like that, Connor?
Absolutely, and that's something that I have done a lot of, just like a single microphone catching everything. And the first thing that comes to mind, there's a lot of things that you can do to actually get like a really, really good quality, balanced recording from a phone or any other like mobile device, or maybe like a little bit step up, you might have like a Zoom. I'm just thinking of like some sort of stationary electronic tool that records audio just like inside of itself, like you can't really adorn it afterwards. Right. One thing that I think of is like the stories that you hear about recording sessions from like the 20s and 30s of like the hot 5s and the hot 7s.
Right, when that's all you could do was have one microphone or something.
Right, and so the band would have to arrange itself in the room in such a way that would acoustically lend itself to getting a good mix. And part of that was having an unamplified bass player or something like that, and or whatever the instrumentation was. Trumpet was usually the farthest thing away from the microphone if we're talking about balancing like multiple instruments and things like that. And maybe you're not having to do that for like an audition tape for college or for like a band thing in school or drum corps or whatever, but that also kind of like the golden rule there being with instruments like ours that are loud and directional, oftentimes you need to be considering or at least trying out a couple of different positions of your orientation, the most important thing being just the sheer distance from where the noise is coming out of your horn and where the microphone is receiving that noise. And if your phone is recording things in a directional manner, like there's a microphone on the front of the phone, that's another thing to consider. You don't want to turn it around and get some sort of weird bounce back from the wall.
Right.
But and Theater Feller, also shout out to your first time hanging in the stream. We are glad to have you. And they bring up a great question. That was during the etching wax recording thingy. You are absolutely correct. So that would be like, I think you might be referencing like wax cylinders, like the Edison cylinder. I saw a really funny TikTok the other day on the internet of someone who had put like a modern tune, like some like really modern song onto a wax cylinder and was playing it through like a phonograph.
I believe you sent that to me.
I think I sent that to you. So that would be an interesting kind of thing. I think we should bring that back. I think like we should have all records just like have like a wax cylinder version of themselves.
Yeah. You talking about, placement like that. I just posted a link. I was looking for it while you were talking. But I watched this video a long time ago. I don't know when it was. The video came out in 2017. I don't remember when I found it. But essentially, it's called One Mic, the Minimalist Recording Series. And if you want to be technical, it is one microphone, but it's two capsules. It's a stereo microphone. But that's kind of semantics at this point. But the idea is they put this stereo ribbon microphone in the middle of the room and place amps and everything, so it's just like what you were describing, and then they video it, and it's kind of everybody focused around one microphone. So this is them talking about it, but I think it's kind of interesting, and kind of what we're talking about. Yeah, I think the placement is the most important thing. Just thinking about with my phone, one thing that I would see a lot of people do on like Instagram or something like that is they'd play right into it. And it's like your phone might not like that.
Some phones are smart enough to like drop the gain like intuitively, like they have like some sort of automatic sensor for that. But you don't want to trust that because it might not be the same every single time. There's going to be certain distances from your microphone, and you'll learn this through trial and error of like it's super, super clippy at a certain point. Like I know like when I had an iPhone, if I was like right up on the bell with the like into the camera, it would have a certain way of dialing it in gain wise so it wasn't crazy distorted and just like deep fried. But if I stepped like 7 to 5 feet away, for some reason the sensitivity of that was lost. So is a balance, like anything.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And just figuring out, that's ultimately no one can say this is exactly how you should mic your instrument in your room with your room size, shape, what's in your room. All of those sorts of things do play kind of a big role. And in a perfect world, we would start with the room. We would design a room that's perfectly designed for our instruments. That's almost never how it actually works out, right? We're never able to just like, this is, this wall set up here to reflect this, those sorts of things. So we have to kind of deal with what we have to, and having, like acoustic things in the room, that doesn't necessarily always have to be, fancy acoustic treatment. Sometimes that can just be your bed existing in the room, or like a rug on a wood floor or something like that.
Or your closet. That's what I use a lot, just because it's fabric that's hanging vertically. And if you can put your phone on a desk and shove it like in front of your closet with like some pillows or a blanket on the desk, that like, then you've got like, multiple axes of sound muffling for potentially $0. I mean, you had to buy the clothes, of course, so it's assuming a certain allotment of resources already. So I shouldn't say $0.
Right, but it's not. Most people probably have clothes and have a closet. Can't speak for everyone, but those are things you probably have on hand. And yeah, that's a good way to kind of work with it, is just minimizing the reflections. When a room, the best solution again is a really nice room that the reflections are good and the reflections that you want. But in most rooms, like a really bad room design is a perfectly square room. And most bedrooms aren't always perfectly square, but they're pretty close. So we want something that has kind of weird shapes to it, which are rarely the case with bedrooms. So yeah, making sure that that's the case. And I think one thing I always think about is, you could use $1,000 mic in a bad room or a poorly treated room, and it would sound worse than using your phone in a well-treated acoustically treated room. Is a weird way of saying that. But yeah, so that's kind of a good starting point, and just learning how to record yourself with a phone I think is an important skill, and it's something I worked on because I initially just wanted to, every teacher that I've ever had is like, are you recording yourself? Are you recording yourself? And it's always like, sometimes I'm recording myself. And then I kind of made a decision that I'm going to always record myself. And that's kind of where me going on Instagram, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, or 7 years, I don't know, whenever that was, a while ago. 5 years ago, I think it's probably more accurate. But yeah, that was kind of a practice log thing, before the 100 days of practice or whatever. It's like that was just me practicing and recording it, and you want something that doesn't sound terrible, so you learn how to record a little bit better with that. But yeah, we got some, Airsoft Mikey had some comments about his bass slide getting worked on. That's always good to keep those in tip-top condition.
Absolutely.
And then a little bit more on topic here. I'm trying to get to the comments thing. There we go. Theater Feller says, when I record myself practicing on the mic, and sometimes I tap my feet to keep in time, the mic captures a tap instead of the sound of the instrument. I don't know why. Yeah, I mean, it's not a smart device always. It's sometimes a pretty simple device, but it's trying to be smart, and it might get confused. What I would say is that just as a general practice thing, I try to not tap my foot very loudly. I'm not a person who says you can't tap your foot, but I always think about tapping my toe inside of my shoe, because it actually can be really annoying for others sometimes when you're playing with them, if you're tapping your shoe really loudly, and it's where you interpret time to be, which isn't necessarily wrong, but when the sound hits for your shoe, that might be a little bit late or something, and it can be really off-putting sometimes if you're playing with others. So that's why I always try to tap my toe, not my foot.
Right. If you're at home, you're probably not hurting anybody.
Right.
There is one thing that I notice is like my externalization of time, even if like kinesthetically or in my head, like I feel like I'm keeping really good time. Sometimes like when it turns into the foot, even if my brain is still like synchronized and we're cool, like I go back and listen to myself playing the trombone, it's like, oh yeah, we're in time, we're fine. I'll notice that like the actual physical realization of it, there's like some phasing there. And something, if you're into like jazz music or at a jazz concert anytime in the near future, which I highly recommend going to check out if you can, just go like during a drum solo, watch all the members of the band's hands and feet, because they're all going to be trying to keep time to make sure that they come back in at the right time. But I've noticed that even with like the best musicians in the world, sometimes their physical manifestation of the beat is a little different, which is kind of funny. It's like they're always end up being correct, but it's like sometimes visually, because that's usually not the goal, unless it is you're doing something like marching band or something like that, where of course visually it has to
it
line
matters
up. That's a little bit different. That's slightly more important, which is why I never got into the cool marching bands, coordination and all. But if you're interested, there is a trombone song that was written where you are not only allowed to tap your foot, you are explicitly told to do so. And it's a really good exercise to be able to get through that song, because the rhythms are insane and you have to keep a steady beat the whole time. And I think that I came out the other side of that song after practicing it way better time-wise. It's called Elegy for Nippy Two. I think it's the second one. Is that a Bernstein composition?
I've never played it. I've heard it played once. I don't remember, but
it's really fun. I'm gonna fact check it right now.
Go ahead and fact check it. But kind of going back to the recording stuff. So yeah, learning how to just record with your phone, because especially for most of us, we always have our phone in our pockets. I don't always have, a fancy microphone, fancy interface, a computer. I don't always have those things. Sometimes I just have. My phone. Also, welcome Christine Hannon to the chat. I believe this is the first official time.
Oh, that's me.
That makes it even funnier.
Oops.
So we're just doxing your partner here now.
Might be.
But yes. So it was Bernstein, as Christine now has told us.
Let me type the name of the chat. Elegy for Nippy Two is the name of the song.
Yeah. But yeah, so I always like to be able to record with my phone. It's very useful, just to know kind of where to put it, and thinking about not thinking about the directionality of sound. And another thing that is kind of relevant to this, I think, is thinking about if your instrument should be heard directly or not. And I would argue that not every instrument should be heard directly. Like thinking about a tuba or a euphonium, we're not really usually sticking our ear in the bell and listening to it that way, right? We're usually getting it as a reflection off of a wall. And with both tuba and euphonium, I find that they often sound better if you're capturing the reflection versus the actual sound. That being said, reflections get really complicated really quickly. And so like with my personal recording setup in this room, I do capture the direct sound, but it's not exactly what I would, in my perfect world, that's not what I would do. It's just kind of what works well enough. So you know, thinking about reflections and just kind of how that sound works. And you know, one of the stories that I've always heard, and you can try this too, you know, if you have the ability to listen to like an orchestral tubist in a hall, if you hear them out in the hall, they'll sound really good. If you go right next to them and put your head in their bell, it might not sound so good. And that's just
physically unpleasant too.
Right, there's that too. But you know, you have to play to the room a lot of times, and where the microphone is placed in that room changes how you might choose to play, or it maybe should. You know, like LA studio players sound different than orchestral players often because they're used to a microphone being right here. They have to sound good in a microphone that's right there versus a microphone that's all the way in the back of the hall, you know, hung up in the air somewhere. So it's, you know, just a different focus of attention. But yeah, so maybe the next thing we talk about is kind of going up. I hate to say tiers in this way for microphones, but I think it's kind of relevant. So maybe talking about just talk about different microphones in general, different types of microphones. So the kind of, we'll start with dynamic being kind of the simple microphone that, you know, that's kind of your cheaper microphones that you might find that you can probably get for $100 or so. You can get other types of microphones for that price too, but you know, your SM57, that's a really common one for trombone and for tuba. Beta 52 is kind of a common tuba one. But these are mics that are really good at kind of picking up right there, and they're, you know, maybe not as colorful at times and things like that, but they work well. And then kind of the next thing is like the condenser microphones, and that's generally what I use for most of my my recordings is some type of condenser microphone. I know that's also what you use primarily, right, Connor?
That's what I'm using right now.
Right. I'm technically using a shotgun microphone, which I can kind of put in frame, which is under the umbrella of condenser microphones, but it's not. It's a little different. But yeah, that's for speaking. But for like for trombone, I don't know if I can put this in frame. No.
I see it.
You see it?
Oh,
well, yeah.
No, right. I see it on a different screen.
Right, you see it, but
My bad.
Everybody else doesn't. But yeah, I use a ribbon mic for trombone usually, but sometimes I use a condenser mic. But anyway, you know, any mic that you use, it's going to have a different frequency response, which is essentially saying that it will pick up bass frequencies, low frequencies, high frequencies in different proportions, and that might change depending on where it's facing, you know, and all of those sorts of things. So at the end of the day, it's like you have to use the microphone you have, and then you have to figure out how to make that one sound the best. So a microphone that's right up on top of a trombone bell or a tuba bell or something might not be the same one that you want in the back of a hall.
Right. That's a good consideration. It just depends on the type of sound wave and where it's coming from that you want to capture in the ultimate end product.
Right.
That being said, like a lot of good can be achieved by the microphone that you have, but that's an interesting distinction that that's something that's definitely a lack of knowledge on my end, as far as like getting the recorded quality that one, like the industry standard for what like a brass instrument, like a tuba, euphonium, trombone, or otherwise would sound like in a hall. Like you said, the reflection, that's a totally different practice. Right. Itself. I'm kind of getting off topic here, but
yeah, and that's you know, and at the end of the day, most of us aren't fortunate enough to have a hall to play in and record in all the time. You know,
right? That's
one
it's
can
a really
dream.
Expensive accessory for your microphone. Yeah.
I'm in a spare bedroom, and I do what I can in here, and I think it most of the time sounds okay. But there are plenty of times where I don't like it the way it sounds. And
spare bedroom, feel bad for you, man. It's rough. I'm in the regular bedroom.
Yeah.
So
well, regular bedroom closet, right? Well, not now, but. You know.
Not right now. I'm in the real room this time.
Right, but that's where you record the trombone noises.
That's where the magic happens. Right. Yes.
So yeah, but you know, it's like that's the thing. It's like you just kind of have to figure out how to mic things with the room. You know, with what you have. I think that's an important thing. Is, you know, you can throw thousands of dollars into microphones, and you still might not get a good recording if you don't fundamentally understand how they work, and also just listen, because I think that that's ultimately your should be your job, is to try to play and then record, listen. It's like, does this sound the way I want it to sound? It doesn't. What doesn't sound the way that doesn't not have enough bass? Let's try moving the microphone a little bit closer. So a big thing that maybe we could talk about is proximity effect. Do you know what proximity effect is, Connor?
That is that when like an ambulance drives past you and the pitch gets? No, that's the Doppler effect.
That's the Doppler effect.
That's when you get closer to the microphone, the breadth of frequencies, like you lose the high end the closer you get to the microphone. Is that what the proximity effect is?
You said say what you said again. Sorry.
So the closer that you get to the microphone, the less of the highs and the more of the lows that you get from what you're picking up.
Yeah, I think that's essentially true. I'm not 100% sure if the highs are going away or just if the lows are becoming more present. That might be a specific question. But it definitely increases the bass as you get closer. So sometimes if you have a mic really far away, it might not sound like a really full sound, and it might not sound as, pleasing. It might not sound like what it sounds like in your head. And that's another thing that is kind of important, is you may not sound like you think you sound in your head. Which, not to make it sound negative, but in a lot of ways, you generally sound worse than you hear it.
Yeah, I've pretty much never sounded like what is going on in my head. I don't know too many people that do.
It's a lot of it's similar to listening to your own voice being recorded. It's not resonating in your head as much, so it doesn't sound the way that you think you sound. But yeah, Theater Feller is talking about the most hall-like recording or place to play is their dining room. And yeah, I did some things. When I was a kid living with my parents, I would practice. So there's one spot in my parents' house, they still live in that house, where there's like a stairwell, and that whole space is open pretty much. So it's like this whole area that's 2 floors worth of ceiling height, and it's maybe 12 feet wide, maybe a little less. I'm not really sure. I'm not really great with dimensions of things, but it's this pretty big space, and the house is also kind of open concept. So even though it's somewhat of a box, it kind of goes other places as well. But yeah, what I'd always do is I'd practice. I would sit a chair in the middle of this hallway and practice tuba at the bottom, and then I'd practice trombone at the top of the stairwell. And everyone hated it, maybe not everyone hated it, but my sister definitely wasn't a fan. I definitely filled the house with my noise. But, I had a nice time. And I think that's, this is, again, getting a little bit off topic, but that's a good way to kind of work on some sound concept things, is playing in a bigger space. I think that's something that's really helpful. So I always would try to weasel my way into playing in large rooms as much as I possibly could. A lot of schools don't want you to play in the hall all the time because, some donor donated a bunch of money, and I understand that. That being said, if you're allowed to, follow all rules, but if those rules include you getting access to larger spaces, whether you're in high school, college, or whatever, go to those larger spaces. Even if it's just a classroom versus a practice room or something like that, or a living room versus a bedroom when no one else is home, or something like that. My father chimed in and said that he liked me practicing in those open spaces. He's probably the most forgiving of, maybe not forgiving, but enjoyed the amount of music I brought to the house the most. Because it's brass instruments are loud. There's no escaping it unless you have a perfectly even an acoustically treated room is not the same as an acoustically soundproof room, and there's really no such thing as soundproof. You can just deaden it so much that it's practically soundproof. But the way you do that is you build a room inside of a room. I don't know how many people have access to that in their home. It's not a super common thing. So, I think that's one of those things to kind of think about too, is the space that you're recording in, where to place the mic. In an ideal world, a big room, probably with the microphone, 18 feet, 12 feet away, somewhere in that sort of range. That's kind of where I would like to have it. In my 10 by 12 office, there is no 18 feet away, even if I'm going, I guess maybe if I'm going diagonal, there would be. But yeah, not really. And that doesn't work for my video of having the camera in a certain spot and sitting in a certain spot. So going back to the recording thing, and a great mic is a great thing, but it's also not the only thing. It's not necessary, but just kind of playing around with it. And each phone's different, each microphone's different, each room's different, each instrument's a little bit different. But I always think about it as it's going through the chain of the order of operations, and the most important thing to getting a good recording is you, and then the next thing is a good instrument, and then a good recording setup, and we can divide that into further things. But that's the sort of thing that I kind of think about, is it starts with you, then the instrument, then into the microphone. Because I've done some kind of commercial recordings, and sometimes I feel like people are like, I don't want it to sound that bright, I don't want it to sound that harsh. And it's like, well, I can make some adjustments, but you kind of played kind of harsh and brittle and bright.
Right.
I think
you're saying, like, recording the client and then they listen back to themselves and say, oh yeah, the sound is no good. It's like,
right. I was
sorry.
Right. And that gets into, what's your job as a recording engineer? Is to make them sound better, or is that to make them sound the way that they sound? Probably depends to some extent.
Right.
But that's something to kind of think about, is ultimately you being a good player, you sounding good, putting good sounds into the room is where we want to start with recording. But there's one other thing that we could talk about too, which is the playing off axis to a microphone. So do you know about that, Connor? Have you thought about, do you ever move the microphone where it's not directly in front of your trombone bell or euphonium bell or whatever?
Absolutely. That's definitely my standard to go. Is I probably play just I don't know, if I were a clock. And
can you give me a degree?
I can't give you a degree. I was about to, and I was going to look real cool, but then I was like, I don't actually know degrees. So I'm going to pretend like I'm a clock, and the phone is midnight. I probably play at 12:03, just barely off of the axis, maybe a little bit more, just enough for sometimes the edge of my bell is covering over the microphone itself.
Yeah. So
I'm shooting just past it.
And every instrument's a little bit different, and also it's what sound do you want to be, how do you want it to be recorded? It's what you're after.
Right.
That's something that's something you can manipulate in a recording, and that's you see that with vocalists a lot. You'll see them bring the microphone away from their face a little bit when they're singing something really high, and it might get a little harsh. And you can see them in real time making those sorts of decisions, because the best place to make things sound good is right at the source. Right. So there's no mixing engineer that's making a decision. You're making it sound better. So I tend to play a little off axis, and with my tuba mics. So I have two tuba mics that are behind me. Obviously you can't see them by design; they're out of frame. But the main one is pointed to the edge of my bell, or maybe even just past the bell. And one of the things I like about that microphone is the capsule rotates, so I can kind of fine-tune that depending on if I change where I'm sitting or if I'm playing a different tuba. And I find that makes, especially with my larger C tube, it makes it where it's a little less kind of inside of the tuba sounding. And if I had a better sounding room, I would get a reflection instead of the actual
straight core.
But that gets really problematic with bad rooms, because you think about, essentially it's going to get all of these different, it's going to bounce off of different walls and going to get to the microphone at different times, which causes phase problems where different frequencies get canceled out, and it's a terrible time and it sounds terrible. So if you don't have a well-treated room, that probably won't work well, which is kind of, I think, what we're addressing. But yeah, and then with euphonium, I'm a little bit off axis also. Trombone, I'm more direct, but I think I'm further away than most people would tend to be. So I'm not necessarily, you can't, in some of my earlier videos, you would see the trombone mic on camera, and then I would be off axis. But now I put it a little bit further back, partially because I want it to not be on camera, which I know is kind of an unnecessary endeavor. But I like the idea of you don't think about it. That's why I use this shotgun mic that is designed to be further away from your face when you're talking, and still sound okay and kind of reject the air conditioning unit that's going. Theoretically, that won't be a problem forever, but Texas summer, that's definitely a problem for now.
Right.
But yeah, so that's the sort of stuff that some of the recording things that are important. And then, another thing that we can talk about too is having multiple microphones. And is that helpful? And sometimes it is, but multiple microphones, you're asking for a problem.
That's out of my pay grade. I'm not cool enough to know how to do multiple microphones at once.
So one of the things, for most of my stuff, I use one microphone. Eventually, I have a room mic, but I don't usually use it. And again, because the room doesn't sound very good. But for tuba specifically, especially because I'm changing between my F and C tuba a lot, and they do really sound different. They don't. And not only do they sound different, but especially the C tuba, it's a pain to record because I have a 6-quarter C tuba, which was 100% not designed to play in a 10x12 room. It was designed to play on the orchestral stage with 80 other people where you're the only tuba player. That's why it was made. That's why you buy it. You don't buy it to record all-state etudes in your office. It can do that, but that's not why you pay the big bucks for it.
It's not what they were thinking when they were hammering out that bell. They were like, man, this is going to sound great in somebody's office, man. It's really,
with 8-foot ceilings.
Yeah. It's going to go right back in their head.
Right. So, and again, the worst room design is a perfect cube, which this office is close to that. I want to say it's 8.5 by 10 by 11 or something like that. It's just it's not ideal. But anyway, so what I do with the tuba mic, or the tuba mics, is one of them is kind of capturing the direct sound, and one of them is capturing the room sound, but it's doing it next to it. So going with the off-axis thing, one of them, again, is pointed a little bit off the bell, and the other one is 90 degrees rotated, and it actually is, it's set to figure 8. So it's 90 degrees means that it's rejecting everything that's direct, and it's only capturing from the sides. So the benefit of that is I'm mostly using just that direct microphone, but I can kind of blend in a little room sound, and then especially with my C tuba, I want a little bit more room sound and a little less, direct sound, because that's really not what it was designed for. But that's why for a while I only recorded with my F tuba in my office. It's a couple of years ago when I did an all-state video for Texas, everyone was upset that I played it on F tuba because high schoolers probably don't have access to an F tuba, and I just did it because I wanted it to sound good with my small room, and my F tuba records easier. But the irony is that's my most popular video on YouTube. It's getting close to 100,000, and it's because there's hate comments. So, it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Maybe it actually helped me. Maybe I should only do clickbaity things and just everything is, it's everything is misleading or something. I don't know. But back to the microphone. So I blend in that second sound, and I do a thing that's called mid-side pair. And if anyone actually wants to look at that, you can look at mid-side. It's more complicated than I think is necessary to get into. But what you might try to do is have a close mic and a further away mic. And I think this is where I kind of wanted to go with it, is that if you have two microphones, they either need to be the capsules have to be perfectly the same distance from the source. So that's where the sound enters the microphone. That's not the edge of the grill of the microphone. That's inside of it. So you want to have those be perfectly, otherwise you're going to have problems. And then if you're doing it where they're further apart, the general rule is that you want to have the second one 3 times further away than the first microphone. So that's kind of a general, if you do that, you probably won't have problems. You can bring that second one closer, but you have to understand how things work a little bit better to do that, and it's just really not worth anybody's time. And if it gets shifted a little bit, these are situations where people literally get out tape measures for microphones. So if you're not willing to do that, I probably would stick to one, or have the second one be at least 3 times the distance. So if your microphone is 6 inches away from your bell, then you need to go at least 18 inches away, or any other standard unit of measurement.
Sure.
I know.
Cases.
I don't think in the Philippines they use the empirical system, and for good reason, because metric is better. But
it is demonstrably better.
Right.
Different podcast though.
But yeah. So Theater Feller says, I shall make an instrument to fill a hall with your sound alone. Pandemic happens. Tuba. Yep. That's about how it went. So.
Been sounding real good just sitting in the room for a long time.
Right. And
well,
then
I think it sounds good. And then I'll get into a hall and we'll figure something out there. But
and then
making the room.
Sorry.
Work in the room. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, I already flashed the comment on the screen. So, but anyway, me listening to microphone technologies my wallet could only dream of, and that's the important thing that I want to stress is, my goal is not to say, hey, you should go spend $1,000 or insert whatever amount of money for a microphone. They're more expensive microphones than $1,000. They're microphones that are $10,000, but the important thing is to just experiment with what you have. Whether that's a Zoom recorder, whether that's your phone, whether that's your laptop, like everything has a microphone built into it these days, and you probably have something that you can record on, and that might be all that you have access to, and that's totally okay. It's like I've invested over many years into recording stuff, but it has hurt financially. I feel it.
Yes, we should make the distinction between Zach and I's fascination with recording technology and devices that is separate from that was not out of direct necessity. I have to have this to succeed in music. Right. I will say I can only speak for myself, but anecdotally, I have had the floor wiped with me at many different auditions where I had gotten through a recording round with a nice microphone or something like that I had mixed myself and made it perfect like that, and I get there and the pros that are sitting there in the final round, I was like, used a laptop, used my phone, just had a CD player going on in the background, I played along with it, had it on an iPod Shuffle. No, I never heard iPod Shuffle, but yeah, but that's you don't need that. You can advance very far for purposes of auditions and musical success.
Right. It's not necessary. The world has shifted, and I think that things will get back to normal. I know every part of the world's a little bit different with our interpretation of what we should do and what's going on in certain areas. That's obviously outside of the scope of Low Brass U Studio class to really talk about. But I think that regardless of how all of this plays out, recording at home or Zoom lessons, those sorts of things are only going to be more likely to happen. And what I would say, that sort of stuff as an investment, a lot of my microphones and cameras and stuff, this is on a cinema camera. Do I need a cinema camera? No. It's an old one. It's not like a super, state-of-the-art cinema camera or anything. But, I had a lot of this stuff before, this global situation that we're all in to some extent. And it was easy for people to say, hey, I need this masterclass taught. I've seen your YouTube videos. I know that you can get on Zoom. I think that those, right. So it's definitely not a bad thing to be considering. But am I recommending anyone go into credit card debt for a microphone or something like that? It's not what I'm advocating by any stretch. And ultimately, you can spend a ton of money, but if you don't learn how to use it, it doesn't matter. And I'm still learning. I'm still trying things. I'll say that this is my microphone that I always use for trombone, and then I'll try one of my other microphones. I should have been using this one. And it's just but I read online that it said that this was good for trombone or this was good for, no one's saying that's good for euphonium. No, brass instruments very low on the totem pole of we'll sell microphones if people know that this is good for that. In general, when you're looking at microphones, the best advice I can give you is try to find something that's talked about being used for an instrument in your frequency range. So for tuba, a bass drum mic, a bass guitar cabinet mic, a microphone that's used for acoustic bass, those sorts of things. those are the sort of things that you want to be looking for. For trombone, it's more sort of guitar sort of things, or maybe tenor saxophone, or maybe male voice is another one that kind of overlaps. So those are things to kind of think about when you're looking at microphones, because there are so many microphones in this world, and they all can work. So Theater Fellow says, I also notice each platform has a different microphone response, recording via Audacity versus OBS versus Zoom. Each have a different sound, though, through the same mic. And yeah, that's an unfortunate thing that I wish wasn't the case. But a lot of these programs do their own processing, and a lot of the time that is not helpful. Sometimes it is helpful, but it's not guaranteed that it's going to make things sound better. It might make things sound worse. And then anything that's transmitted through the internet is subject to being compressed, with data, which is going to then in turn affect the audio.
Right. One thing particularly with Zoom that you have to be careful of is turning on, like, I can't remember what they call the setting, but like actual audio or real sound.
I'm gonna put it on the screen because I have you up here.
Aha! There you go.
Actually, maybe I can't do it.
It's okay.
Let's see, audio settings. We're literally just going through Zoom audio settings right now. It must be under advanced. Things keep moving. Yeah, show in meeting, enable original sound. That's
original sound. So if you're teaching or participating in a lesson, like if you're playing tuba, euphonium, trombone into your microphone, if you do not have original sound enabled, there's a noise gate on
And also,
Zoom.
just looking at this, you'll be able to see it delayed on the stream now. But it has all these other things, which, to be clear, this is not the computer that I'm using to Zoom with Connor to bring him in here is not my normal setup for a Zoom lesson or something. So all these settings are wrong. So we can just change these. If you're playing an instrument, you want to basically disable anything like this, and it'll probably, an echo cancellation. I guess auto is probably the best. I'd have to check on that, but original sound is really the main thing for a brass instrument kind of having the best chance for success.
Yep.
Oops, got rid of you. That's what I wanted. Now you're back. But yeah, Theater Fellow says that's a brilliant approach to looking for microphones. And yeah, that's something I kind of got turned on to because I got super deep into thinking about microphones, and it was just like, well, no one says that this is a tuba mic because no one, in the grand scheme of things, no one cares. It's just as far as like, if you're a microphone company and you say this is the best acoustic guitar microphone, you will sell a lot. If you're, if you're doing that with tuba, you might sell 0.
Yeah, maybe not so much tuba.
Trombone,
also,
a few
Zach,
more. Yeah.
I think that when we changed to enable original audio, I think we turned off whatever noise gate was muting possibly my AC unit that is coming by me.
No,
I'm not sure if that's coming through.
That was my audio to you, which no one but you can hear.
Okay, well, I will enjoy the sound. It sounds like the ocean.
Yeah. Oh, is it noticeably worse?
But just enough because I was thinking about it because we were on the conversation.
Yeah.
But that's all good.
Yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, so that's the sort of thing that I always think about is, what instrument, frequency range, and it's a little more complicated than that. But that's a good starting point. But yeah, the audio settings, look for those sorts of things, and in general, turning off anything that's changing what you're doing is, especially with brass instruments, because it's just going to think that that's some like car going by or something like that. And a lot of this stuff wasn't meant for music. That's just kind of the way that it is. And that's why even with this, we'll bring back the curtain a little bit. I haven't really talked about my complete setup, and it's always changing. It literally changed today with me putting this TV up.
It was almost going to be a lot different today, too.
Right. We were having little issues. Windows updates are very annoying on a computer that you use once a week. I'll say that.
I think we can just go ahead and say that Windows updates are blanket annoying.
Right. And in my perfect world, eventually that won't be a problem. But we're not there yet. But
this is what you strive for.
Yeah. So with my audio setup for this is I have a separate computer that's running the audio stuff for both of us. So it's like one computer for Connor's coming in, going into this computer that's doing a little bit of light processing. This microphone here, same thing. And that ocean that you might be able to hear, that's probably just the air conditioning unit that is blaring away, because I currently reside in the state of Texas, and it's a little warm, and I'd like to not sweat through this entire show. I might be getting a different mic at some point to deal with that, but I don't need it. It might improve our quality just slightly, but it doesn't really matter. And that's the thing. Again, I have multiple microphones, but I don't have the perfect microphone for rejecting this air conditioning unit, and I could go out and buy it, or I can try to deal with it the best I can with what I have. I think that's always the best strategy, is to try to find the best way. And when I record my YouTube videos, I never have the AC on, and it's awful. That's why recently I've gotten some comments. It's like, I think one of them was like, "You being sweaty in this makes it even better," and it's just like, yep, no AC because it's loud. I had to turn it off. And,
I mean, that's something that you have to do regardless of any setup or any recording studio that you go to. It's AC has to go off, and sometimes that can be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, you can deal with it a little bit if you're in a real professional studio. You can baffle it and things, and but people who convert homes and things don't usually have the ability to do that for a recording studio. But if you're in a really expensive professional studio, the AC can stay on. I see. Because it's baffled, and again, that's not pushing the limits of my knowledge a little bit to talk about that. But
none of us are in baffling territory in our recording budget, so I don't think we need to get into the weeds on it. Not yet.
But as they say, lowbrass you to the moon. So
straight to the moon.
We'll get it there. And
you do say that.
Rest assured, now that this channel is monetized, I'm investing all of that money straight into Dogecoin, and my profits are just gonna 10x. No, I still am not eligible for my first check from YouTube, because you have to get to $100, and we're not there yet. But that's okay.
I don't know, man. Keep shedding.
Yeah. So Theater Fellow says the sweat adds to the sense of effort that goes into recording the etude. Yeah, I guess if that works. But yeah, their chef's kiss, awesome. Yeah, Theater Fellow is new-ish to the streams, but very much not new to the channel. I think Theater Fellow is probably one of the most prolific commenters, if I had to say.
OG commenter.
So
yeah, fellow here.
The videos are coming. I'd like to get ahead on them, but I don't have one for tomorrow. I will do it tomorrow morning, as I usually tend to do. Eventually, I'll get ahead on all of them. But I've been busy.
Me think of a question.
Yeah.
What's the sweatiest video in the Lowbrass U universe? I'll share mine if you share yours.
I'm just not sure off the top of my head. One of the All-State Jazz ones is one that has that comment. I think it's one of the All-State Jazz bass trombone etudes for Texas this year, if I remember correctly. It's hard to keep track. I respond to almost every comment, unless it's just there's nothing to say to it. I try to respond
to my comments.
I do respond to your comments. Your last comment of what was it? I responded to your last comment. You may not have gotten a notification, but I definitely responded to your last comment.
Well, clearly I'm not even on my own YouTube account right now, so
what do you know?
Notifications.
Yeah, what do you know? So, but yeah, so I don't know what the sweatiest video is. Probably, it might even be an older one too. I just don't know. I do the best I can. That's why I record them early in the morning when it's the coolest out, and I do a take or two and then turn the AC back on. And also because I've got multiple video lights. One of the reasons why the background looks darker right now than it does in my videos is because I don't have all of the lights on right now the way I do in my videos. So it gets hot. There are multiple computers running, there are multiple cameras, there are multiple screens, everything. You don't realize how much heat all of these things generate. But yeah, it gets hot in this little room, and eventually, in my perfect world, I'll have this dedicated space that I build from scratch, and all the computers will be in a server closet, and the AC will be baffled. You'll never hear it. All of these sorts of things. So, but yeah, we're doing the best we can right now, and I feel like I should prioritize the sound of the video over my looks in the video. As much as it pains me to look at, especially, I have to see these videos more than everyone else because I have to edit them, like put the different camera angles together and all that sort of stuff. I have to see it more,
right.
And it's brutal. And now, since I have this bigger screen now, I'll have to see it in larger format, where my head is bigger than my actual head.
Right.
So let's see here. We got a couple comments.
Good comments.
But yeah, thanks for the recognition. Yeah, I mean you're on the comments, and that helps the algorithm. So I'm definitely not gonna say don't comment. Everyone should comment
right.
as much as Theaterfeller does. So, but yeah, I always appreciate the comments, and I try to respond to everyone. So sometimes if it's just like sounds good, I might just throw up a thumbs up or something like that. But if there's a real question, I almost always answer it, unless I miss it, which I look at it a couple times a day, look at comments, but sometimes YouTube is weird. Let's see. Thanks for the mic tips. I got really lucky with getting one that worked for tuba, but I haven't been able to find a good way to recommend mics for my higher brass friends. Yeah, so higher brass, that depends on if we're talking trumpet or horn. Those are very different instruments, especially when it comes to recording.
Yes.
And French horn, like the tuba, like we were talking about, do we direct mic? Do we not direct mic? It depends on the situation. With French horn, the times that I've recorded... Sorry?
Oh, so I think you're about to say exactly what I was about to say, so keep going.
The times that I've recorded French horn, I prefer to record it off of a reflection. But again, at the end of the day, especially if you're recording a group and you need to get a little bit more French horn, which like a brass quintet is a perfect example. French horn players in general aren't playing loud enough in brass quintets, and if you record a brass quintet, you're going to lose the horn. So you want to put a microphone probably behind them so you're getting a direct sound, but you can turn them up a little bit at certain moments.
Right.
Because there's no way to get a reflection of their sound that isn't probably being engulfed with other people's sounds.
Right.
But I'm definitely not the expert on miking anything, let alone French horn. I don't play French horn, and I've only recorded it a few times. Trumpet, I've done that a lot more. And, trumpet, the thing that kind of can happen that I think a lot of people don't like is that it can sound really brittle, really bright, and it's kind of like the worst form of the trumpet. And that's when going off axis, like we've talked about, for certain instruments can kind of help, because it will kind of dull that harshness a little bit. And another thing is what mic you choose. So, with trumpet, if you're using your phone, I would almost never play directly into it. And especially if you're doing something for like Instagram and you're getting video, it's nice to see a profile sometimes. So that's one thing that I would generally recommend. But then also, ribbon mics tend to dull the trumpet in a way that's pleasing, make it a little bit less harsh and brash. Any SH word, all the harsh, brash. There's got to be other ones. That's all I got. But that's the sort of thing that playing a little bit off axis and something that maybe dulls the high end. So one thing that you can do when you're looking at a microphone, if that's something that you're interested in, let's just put in. So this is a very common trumpet microphone, and we're going to look up the frequency response chart. And so you can see what that looks like and what it's rejecting and what it's kind of picking up more of. Let's see. Gotta go.
I'll say while you're looking that up, I'll add that the microphone that I use for recording trombone, I'll hold it up right here, is Audio-Technica. It's the ET2020 condenser mic, and I have a couple of trumpet friends that also have one as well that they say it does the job pretty fine. With the stuff that we record, which is mostly like playing either like a little bit off axis, but like definitely not a reflection at all. It's like mostly playing straight into it for like jazz and commercial sort of sounds. There is like with like the core, just like basic audio that I get from it for trumpet or trombone, I do like to equalize it just a little bit,
right?
And that's something we haven't really touched on yet. But.
And yeah, that's the other thing. It's like you can make anything sound like anything else in post. it's always going to sound best if you're able to capture something that sounds good. So let's see if I can. I think I'm going to. Cool. I even did it. Well, I mostly did it. I got to edit this a little bit. But you can see this frequency response thing. And with that, you kind of can see that it kind of tails off at the end. It's pretty flat. And that's kind of, it's a little bit of, I don't want to say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way. A sign of a good microphone is being pretty flat. But you can see that it tails off at the end, which is going to kind of dull some of that really harsh sort of sound that you might get from a trumpet that is a little less pleasing or less than pleasing. So, those sorts of things. But sometimes a boost in a certain spot, like the tuba microphone that I use, which I was turned on to it by one of my teachers, Rex Martin, and I know also Tuba Dylan on YouTube, he uses the same microphone. It's a blue mouse, like if you're familiar with the blue Yeti microphone, that's a pretty common USB microphone. They make this microphone called the Mouse, and it's one of the more professional microphones, but it has a boost in the mids and low mids, which is kind of like what you would EQ a tuba to do anyway. So I just don't EQ it usually.
Nice.
Especially with my F tuba, it's just kind of like, that's like what it sounds like in my head, and that's kind of what I just wanted. But yeah, going back to what Connor kind of briefly said, you can always change the EQ in post. The sound can start to get worse the more you mess with it in post, so we want to get the best thing we can from the start. But yeah, you can always EQ it, and that's something that's, it gets into this complicated thing for auditions and things where they say no editing or something, and usually that means that they don't want you to splice anything. But, certain microphones, like when you use a ribbon, you almost always want to EQ it. So it's like, do I not use a ribbon so that I can not edit it and not, and you can overly compress things too. That's another thing that we could talk about. So yeah, it's a rabbit hole. And some of it's a good rabbit hole. Some of it is ultimately, like, I feel like what we're doing is we're trying to just play better, and the mics stuff will figure its stuff out. And if you really want it done well, you pay someone, you don't do it yourself. I think that's, if, I'd like to dabble enough, and I've been a recording engineer for projects and for albums and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's like, if I really want the best product, I'll pay someone. I'm cheap, and I'm not going to pay for someone to do every single YouTube video, because that wouldn't be profitable that way. I mean,
that would be expensive.
Right, it would just be a lot of money for, it wouldn't be worth it. Maybe at some point that's how it will be. I think ultimately it'll just be a place that's treated really well, and maybe someone else sets it up for me, but I can't have someone running a camera and running the audio for every single etude video that I do. But yeah, Theater Feller and Avenue to get more views is to ask the audience to find which video is the sweatiest. It's a great idea.
Oh yeah.
So let's just go ahead and put out that bounty. Let's see who of the 7 concurrent viewers can find, or anybody watching this after the fact, who can find the sweatiest video, and there will be a reward of, I don't know, just happy that you did it. Happy that you sat through some videos.
Is happy the right word?
Yeah, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you found the sweatiest video.
I'll give you the answer to my sweatiest video just to tie it off. And I think it's still on YouTube somewhere. You'd have to really, really look for it. But it's more about a cautionary tale of, if you ever find yourself at Fort Myer, is that where the Army Blues plays? And like all this, the ceremonial bands and all that. Anyways,
I think so, but I'm not an expert.
They've got, if you go to Fort Myer for like the American Trombone Workshop or like the solo competition or any of this, they have tons and tons of really cool events. And also, first off, go to those because they're super cool and really, really fun. The music's great. The bands are awesome. But if you do go and you end up playing, they have 2 stages. They got like a really, really big one for like the orchestra and the wind band. And they got like it's like still big, but not as big room that has like a better, more live club room sound. Mm-hmm. And that room is so hot at all times. And the time that I was there, they had like the big thick velvet curtains down and bright lights on us. And it was like a hot day in like spring or maybe early summer. And there was the place had been full. The seats had been full all day of people, breathing and talking. And I don't think you can really tell in the video, but that's just like both. I played there twice, and the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so temperature like warm right now. Like this is just incredible. And I was like, I'll plan for this the second time. And then I did, and I still got incredibly warm on stage. I was like, this is insane. Actually, no, I think I've played on that stage 3 times. All 3 times I've just been incredibly hot. Yeah. So let that be a cautionary tale that if you go and play anything related with the Army Blues, wear a tank top. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's always a problem, especially, you know, I think that my Saturday gig is outside, and I'm pretty sure we'll have to wear we'll have to wear nice, you know, dress clothes, and it's just like, yeah, I don't want to do that when I'm outside. But I will, you know.
That's something to consider if you're playing outside in the gig, or you're the one like booking the contract or something. Maybe have like a temperature number in your mind that you might talk about with the owner or whatever's going on. I've never done it, but it's something that like after playing a few hot gigs, having a particularly hot weekend, it's like, yeah, that might be something I think about now. Only getting hotter.
Right.
That's another discussion for a different day.
So Theaterfeller also says, to add to the topic, your recent live gig solo excerpts really hit different sound-wise compared to the usual indoor recordings. Location is a big factor indeed. And you know what's hilarious about those videos? Because I think that they do sound pretty good. Those were just done on my cell phone. And probably it's because I have this low brass U case that it sounds better. Just kidding. Because I definitely didn't have that case when I filmed those, because those videos are actually pretty old. But yeah, so those are just all of that is just straight cell phone recording, and I actually plan to do some more of those. And because one of the nice things about the board, that the mixing console that we use, is you can just plug a USB thumb drive in it and it'll record the whole gig, and you know, you'll get all the individual tracks for everything, so I can mix it later. But you know, someone else is already mixing it in the moment, and it sounded okay on my cell phone, so that's what I did. You know, it's like it captured all, you can hear the bass pretty well and everything. It's like, it's just my cell phone, but it wasn't right on the speaker or right on the trombone bell. But you know, that's a little bit of a different situation, because even, you know, you're not hearing the direct trombone sound in that video. You're hearing that trombone being mic'd and then being put through the main speakers, and then being captured by the cell phones. It's a little bit of a different situation there for sure. But yeah, I thought, you know, the first time that I took like a cell phone video of a gig and then like listened to it on my like actual speakers, like, oh, actually sounds good from my cell phone. So that's why I haven't gone through and actually brought a thumb drive and like recorded all of it and then tried to mix it later. Like that's gonna make it better or something, because it's already, I don't know, if it ain't broke, you know, don't fix it. Right. Nicholas says, thanks for the tips on higher brass. I'll send my friends this video so they can watch as well. Yeah, hopefully it's helpful. Again, not the end-all be-all. I don't claim to be the world's greatest mixing engineer. I mean, you can find issues, and even in my video that I posted today, you know, there's one low note that, you know, I played pretty loudly, and it, you know, I would have liked to have the gain a little bit lower, but I didn't, you know, and it's like redo the whole video, especially with trying to get out a video a day. There's some level of acceptance that has to go on. Like a couple of days ago, I had a bunch of dropped frames, and my options were, and I realized it after I'd uploaded it, which is like, because I just thought it was like the video editing software being weird and not working correctly, because, you know,
that does happen a lot. Because
I probably could use a new computer, but you know, I just thought it wasn't working properly, especially because with the scrolling music thing, that kind of, it's a little bit intense for the computer. And so, yeah, I thought that it was going to be fine, and then I watched it and was like, oh yeah, this is terrible. I'd have to redo the whole video. I wouldn't be able to get this out right now. So Theaterfeller says, plot twist, the stage was warm to assist in warm-ups both for the instrument and for the player. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
I was warmed up.
Right. Yeah, I hate playing when it's really, really hot out, but it is what it is. But yeah, we should probably call the stream there. I know it's not the longest stream we had. I'd like to try to keep it around an hour to an hour and a half, but I know this is on the shorter side of that. But yeah, so thanks to everyone for watching, and if you have any questions that you want to bring for next time, especially if people leave comments on this video itself, not in the chat, but like after the fact, if you're watching this not live and you want a question answered, we'll probably try to do a good job of reading those, maybe on stream, or at least respond to them. So if you have a follow-up question about microphones or something, and I've got you should be able to find links somewhere. I'm trying to think of where they are, of like all the microphones and stuff that I use. I created like an Amazon storefront thing where you could see all of that, but I don't think I've posted that link in a while. But in all of my videos, I always put what microphone I used, and it's 95% accurate. I think it's mostly accurate. I haven't changed up anything in a while, but occasionally I copy and paste something from an older video and it's not accurate. But I try to do a good job of saying what I'm using so you can see. But that's not me saying, go out and buy this, it'll sound exactly the same, because your room is different, you're different, the situation is different. But great. Well, thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you the same time, same channel, same bat time, same bat channel.
That's right.
All right, yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Catch everybody later.
Bye, friends.
I should always have the end stream button ready to go when I'm ready to end it, but I have to spend time finding it. But goodbye.
Goodbye.
Your goodbye.